Okay, so I want to talk today about universal background checks for Georgia. Now, any discussion of guns has to start with the Second Amendment. And back when I was in law school, the late 90s, all the constitutional scholars kind of agreed that the Second Amendment didn't really protect an individual right to own or use guns. The feeling was that unless you were connected with a militia somehow, the Second Amendment didn't really apply to you. That all changed in 2008 when the Supreme Court of the United States decided a case called District of Columbia versus Heller. And what the Supreme Court said in that case was that there was an individual right to own guns or to use guns under the Second Amendment, not just in connection with a militia. And I actually agree with that part of the decision. I think probably unlike a lot of liberals, I believe in the whole Bill of Rights. That includes the Second Amendment, and I think there is an individual right to own guns under the Constitution. Now, what the Supreme Court also said in the Heller case was that states still have the power to regulate guns. The right to own guns under the Second Amendment is not absolute by any means. So the particular restrictions at issue in the Heller case were very extreme. The District of Columbia had a total ban on handguns. They had a law saying that long guns like hunting rifles, they could only be stored if they were disassembled or otherwise completely inaccessible to use. So the Supreme Court said those kinds of gun restrictions were unconstitutional. And again, I actually agree with that. That's very extreme. Total gun bans, I think, are unconstitutional. Now, to be clear, what we're talking about, I think what most people are talking about today when we talk about strengthening gun laws is nothing like what the Supreme Court struck down in the Heller case. And I think there's really no doubt that universal background checks, for example, would not be held unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. So why are universal background checks important? We used to hear a lot about something called the gun show loophole. And that means when you buy a gun at a gun show, you do not have to go through the background check process that you do have to go through if you buy a gun at a gun store. And that's been around for a while now, and there's been a lot of talk about how that's a problem. You know, we have this background check system, but if you're a person who has a criminal record, you can still buy a gun at a gun show. And so that's still a real thing. I'm not saying it's not a problem. Universal background checks would close the gun show loophole. I think what maybe people are not aware of is that the gun show loophole now is just a small part of the problem. The bigger issue that's arisen recently is buying guns through the internet. Now, you can't just sell a gun to somebody through Amazon and ship it directly to them, but you can arrange person-to-person gun sales through the internet. One place where this happens a lot is called armslist.com. And I'm not trying to give them business, but you can go there and look and see how it works. There's many guns for sale right now in the Atlanta metro area on armslist.com. And if you go on there and find a gun that you want to buy, you can arrange that transaction with the individual gun seller and then buy it from them without any kind of background check. So what does that mean? Today, if you're a person who can't get a gun at a gun store because you have a criminal background, what do? You don't have to wait for a gun show anymore. You can go to armslist.com and find somebody who will sell you a gun without a background check. Now, to be clear, that's completely legal. You know, I'm not saying that armslist.com is doing anything wrong. And the people who are selling the guns through armslist.com are not doing anything wrong either. They're following the law. But the law doesn't require background checks in that situation. That's what needs to change. So what I'm proposing, what a lot of Democrats are proposing, universal background checks would mean even in private sale transactions, you would have to set up a background check in order to complete those transactions. Now, I think it would make sense for there to be a few exceptions to that. For example, family sales. If you sell a gun to your brother, you shouldn't be expected to do a background check on your brother. And then similarly, there should be an exception for people who have a weapons carry license. If you want to sell a gun and someone presents a weapons carry license to you in Georgia with a picture on it, then there's really no reason to go through the background check process there. That person has already been through that process. Now, people tell me sometimes, Andy, you're running in West Cobb. People out there love their guns. They're not going to vote for you if you're standing for something like universal background checks. That is not true. The fact is, the AJC did a poll a couple months ago. 45% of Georgia Republican voters, meaning people who are going to vote in the Republican primary, want stronger gun laws. Not necessarily universal background checks, but this is, I think, everybody's number one priority. If we talk about stronger gun laws, that means background checks. 45% of Republicans want that. Very few Republicans want weaker gun laws. Now, most of the other Republicans just want gun laws to stay the same. So this is a winner of an issue. Polling on the whole country on this issue, Republicans and Democrats, 92% is the most recent one that I've seen, want universal background checks. This is a very popular winner of an issue. There's some polls have shown even higher numbers than that. I mean, it's something that almost nobody is opposed to. So, other than the Republicans who right now are running the state of Georgia. So, universal background checks, I want them. Georgians should want them. Thanks.